to another video by Liminal Spaces. So today we're going to talk about Three Body Problem, the Netflix series. Of course, it's on Netflix. It is released. They put out all 8 episodes for the first season, I guess you'd call it, for the first book. All 8 episodes are already out. I've only watched one of them. We're going to try to do a video on each of them. I wanted to watch one of them first to make a decision, and I feel like it's really good. There are things to talk about, of course, but I think overall it's an excellent series, so I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm thankful for that, because it could have been a nightmare, because they got the Game of Thrones people to do it, so could have been iffy, right? And there is some weird stuff, but we'll get to that. Overall, really great. I watched the first episode. I had my notebook and my pen, and I was just watching, and then all of a sudden it was over, and I hadn't taken any notes at all. And I feel like that's a really good sign, right? But it means I'm going to kind of stumble through this video a tiny bit. But there is lots to talk about, so let's get going. The opening scene is excellent. It's very, very gory, which you would expect from the Game of Thrones people, of course. But this is never a problem if it's necessary. And I feel like, honestly, in this case, it's completely necessary. Number one, the character literally decides to destroy the human race. The woman who witnesses this, right? So it must be a powerful scene. It has to be, or there's no way we would ever buy that she would go that far. This helps us understand why she would do that. And honestly, I agree with her 100%. I'm cynical anyway. But the scene is 100% justified. It is very gory. It's worth seeing it just so you know where she's at. Also, that Cultural Revolution, it doesn't help when you have a dictator or a revolutionary who's pushing all kinds of weird rhetoric at you. If anyone ever says science can't be trusted, media can't be trusted, I'm the only one who can tell you the truth, that's some 1984 Big Brother crap. You have to avoid that stuff. But we as humans, we get caught up in it. And that kind of stuff is the result. So it's a very necessary, important scene. And I'm glad that it's in there. It's very violent. So then you get to the opening credits. And we started creating this joke after Game of Thrones came out. A lot of television shows started creating opening credits that were generating maps, basically. You know what I mean? They were literally just kind of ripping off Game of Thrones. They would look like toys, or they would spiral out or something like that. And I would have made that joke about this, except it's the Game of Thrones people, so they can use their credits, right? It's not a big deal, but it's very kind of like that. They start off in a very small place and they pull back to a very huge place, which is kind of fun to see. The only thing that bothered me, and this is kind of my critique for this whole, probably for the whole series, we'll see, but in this first episode specifically, as they pull back to the point that we're to human size, it looks like it's 2 people having sex. And I just had to laugh at how hard, and also through a bunch of these scenes with all the women at the bars and all the woman smoking and lighting the cigarette, and they are working so hard to force as much sex into this thing as humanly possible, which is just kind of ridiculous. I am incredibly thankful that we haven't had a sex scene, because it's just not necessary. It's not part of this story. It's not important at all to this story. Because if it's justified, if it's important, it's got to be there. I totally get that. But they are really working hard to get as much in there as they can. And that is one thing I should point out. I have not read the books. Dana's read the books. My aunt read the books. I've talked a lot about the books. Of course, we talked about the books on the channel. We've watched some of the original series from China. Um, this is completely different. Every single scene is 100% different. Things are in different order. We've got new characters. We've got old characters, but they don't know each other when we thought they knew each other, and all kinds of stuff. It's completely different. I do believe that they are keeping the heart of the story. I think it's working. But I do want to get Dana's opinion about it. I want to know, since she's literally read it recently. I'd like, once she's able to watch it, we'll be able to talk about it, and I'll bring it up in later episode recaps. So it's very different. There are things that I don't even know that they're in the book that are in this show, but we'll see once we can talk to Dana. I do know that when Dana watched the preview, she was saying, "Wow, that's not in the first book. That's in the second book." And I do want to say they are not doing all three books in 8 episodes. This is supposed to just be the three-body problem, book number 1. The Dark Forest. If this is successful, then they'll get a green light probably to turn around and try to make the Dark Forest. But Dana wasn't upset about it because she was saying, honestly, once you read all three, it's probably wise to pull things from the others to get them in here so that you don't have to go through so much in the future when you bring those characters back. So we'll see. Once she's able to watch it, we'll really be able to talk about it. But this is supposed to just be the three-body problem. So after the opening credits, we get to a collider. And of course, science is not working the way it's supposed to. And we meet who I assume... So there's 2 lead characters in the book. You've got a scientist and you've got a cop. And this is way general, right? I haven't read it, okay? But the scientist in this, I believe they've made into a woman, which is awesome. In the Chinese version of the show, I believe that scientist's girlfriend has already committed suicide. But in our version, the scientist's boyfriend is still alive. He's in it. So that's interesting, and I do look forward to talking to Dana about it. The suicides are in there, of course. They've got the countdown going, and they do a really unique thing with the countdown, which, once again, I need to talk to Dana about, but in the show itself is really exciting. They have her start to see the countdown, and it's really cool because somebody's singing karaoke, and they show the karaoke screen and they linger on it. It says instrumental. And they just hold it there on the screen. And I was like, why is this shot so long? And there's this weird yellow light kind of dancing in the background of the karaoke screen. But then she sees the yellow light again and again, and you realize she's getting the countdown. She's starting to see it. And I thought that was brilliant because I saw it, but I didn't think anything of it, just like she didn't. I thought it was part of the screen of the karaoke display. It was brilliantly done. Excellent. Even though we didn't need the bar and the people singing and guys hitting on him and blah, 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 you know. But that's where we are. That's okay. And that screen, it just blew my mind. Really excellently done. Then we meet the rest of her friends from school. They've got this whole group of friends. Instead of it kind of just being one person, I believe, they're going to run with this whole group, which I think is a good idea because they're bringing in lots of ideas at the same time. One of them gets the helmet. One of them, of course, their boss commits suicide. So they're all probably going to have different aspects of the story that they'll be covering. and they might get picked off one by one. Who knows? We'll see what happens with the crew, right? But the cop is definitely watching all of them. The cop's excellent. I love the actor. I'm not sure. I think I'll look into the cast a little bit more for the next episode. For this one, I just wanted to get my thoughts down about it. He's excellent. He's really great. And they do a really good job of kind of showing that math isn't working, science isn't working. It's driving the scientific community crazy. And they're starting to kill themselves because of this countdown that appears in front of them, right? And then we meet this mysterious person. It's like the X-Files all of a sudden, right? We got this mysterious person coming out of the shadows talking about all you have to do is stop doing scientific stuff and the countdown will go away. I really enjoyed the part with the police officer where his boss calls. This cop doesn't work for any police station. I think he's just kind of a famous cop. What they suggest in it is that he's been fired from all the major police organizations kind of in the world, I guess. And he says he likes to fail up. So he's been fired a bunch. But I guess he's good enough and famous enough that this rich person hires him to take on this investigation. What is happening to the scientists? So there's a scene where he's working and he's got his whiteboard up and there's all the pictures and the strings, you know, typical cop stuff, right? TV cop stuff. And his phone rings. He answers it. It's his boss. And his boss is saying, you know, don't screw this up. It's really important. And he grabs a cigarette to light it. And his boss says, no smoking in here. And you realize that even though the boss used the phone to communicate with him, he's watching him. There's a camera in the room and he's watching him. I thought it was really brilliant, really kind of funny and strange. So then, after we get the warning about stopping your scientific work or your countdown will hit zero and you will die. They don't say you will die, but they say you don't want to know what happens when it hits zero. After that warning, she explains that at midnight the next day, the stars are going to blink. The universe will wink at you, is how they put it. And they give her this little toy out of a kid's cereal box. And I do want to say at this point, I don't know if that's in the book or not. I'll ask Dana about it. But the television show Lost, I really loved the television show Lost. I thought it was a blast. But it was built on a very strange concept. The idea that you need to ask questions. You need to create questions in your audience's mind. And you don't need to know the answers. You can just push that off. But the more questions you create, the more engaged that audience is going to be, wanting to know what is going on. And they're going to start creating their own idea of what's going on. And the ideas that they'll create in their mind will be genius to them, and they'll love the experience. And it worked for a while for Lost. Lost did incredibly well. It was one of the most successful TV shows of all time. But as it got near the end, people began to realize that it wasn't going to work out the way they'd already created in their mind. You know, J.J. Abrams has that infamous, I guess, idea. He's got that box of magic tricks with a big question mark on it. You know, when he says this is like the greatest packaging of all time because it doesn't tell you what's in it. It just says there's amazing stuff in here. And if you open it, you're going to be disappointed. So he never opened the box, right? That's kind of his little story about how he creates shows. And it really works, but the problem is it can be disappointing at the end. And I hope that they have really solid answers for the questions that we're starting to create watching this show. Why do they need a decoder from the 1960s from a cereal box to see what the stars flashing means, to realize that they are flashing signifying her countdown? And I do understand that when she realizes the universe is creating her countdown, that's enough to say, I'm going to stop doing science, right? I get the power of that. But what's with the 1960s? What's with this weird thing? I don't know. I do understand that the flashbacks we're going to in China are from the 1960s, but this is a cereal box in America, so I don't know. It's a bizarre. That's bizarre. I really hope they have good, solid answers for who the woman was, what the toy is, how is it connected from the 1960s to this present day code in the stars. We need those answers. And I hope they're cool answers, cooler than what I'm going to dream up over the next 3 weeks. We'll see. So that's my big question for it. And then we get the helmet. Of course, she gets the helmet. She puts it on. She's in Crazy Town, right? We see the sun come up. And in the beginning, when we do the pullback in the credits, they go from a tiny atom or whatever, and they come all the way out to a planet, this poor little planet that is surrounded by stars, right? I mean, it looks horrible. Of course, they wouldn't be that close and that claustrophobic in reality, but none of that matters. It looks cool and really bad for that poor little planet. That's the three-body problem, right? The sun never sets on that planet. The chaos of those three suns and the planet shooting all over the place. They have no clue if they're ever going to have any darkness, if they're ever going to have any kind of peace, it's insane. It's a big, big problem. And when she puts on the helmet, she sees the sun come up, of course, and the sand starts blowing, and there's a dead body. Now, the dead body's eyes open. I'm not positive about that, but, could be in the book. Who knows? That's just another question that we need a good answer for, of course. But it's wonderful. I think the work they're doing is great, and I loved seeing the person from China as a much older person in America. No, in London. I think they're in London for this. So she's in London. She's got a home. She's got a daughter. It's super fun. It's excellent. I really think you should give it a check. If you want to talk about the differences from the book and to the television show, please do. I think it'd be very interesting to really nitpick it. I do want to say that there has to be differences. You can't just film the book, of course. And I think we all understand that there's going to be differences. I appreciate that the casting is pretty dang diverse. I really like that, especially for a global problem like this. It makes perfect sense for me. I appreciate that it's not just a bunch of old white guys that we're watching or a bunch of old Chinese guys that we're watching. It's good that there's women there. It's good that there's people from all different nationalities. They need to keep the heart, but they need to appeal to a different kind of audience, to an audience that probably doesn't read. Of course, readers are going to watch it. And of course, they're going to say the book's better. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? The book usually always is better. It's very rare that the movie would actually be better than the book, but most of the time the book's better, and that's fine. It's good that you read the book. It's cool. But I do think it'll be a fun discussion to talk about, wow, this is out. I wonder how they're going to make up for that. Or because it was interesting to learn how science was going wrong in the way that they showed it in the show versus the way they show it in the Chinese show. It was interesting to see the difference. I feel like this had more drive, more questions. I feel like it's a more successful narrative for our audiences, right? I can't speak for a Chinese audience. I don't know. But comparing the Chinese version to this version was a lot more fast and glitzy and what is going on, that's crazy, as opposed to a bunch of people sitting around a table talking about the trouble that they're in, which is just fine. There's nothing wrong with that either. I enjoyed that show. But this, I think, is a little more successful. So that'll be an interesting discussion, I think. I highly recommend you check it out. Even if you don't like it, I think it's going to be very successful. So I think it'll be something that'll be good to at least know about, so that you can talk about it when people bring it up. If you like this, hit like. If you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.